Can you guys hear me? Can everybody hear me? How are we doing today?
I'm good.
Hi, Sophia. Hey, Devin.
Yeah.
Hey,
Mhm.
Kayla. Very good. So today we're going to be wrapping things up, talking about information security management. From the beginning of the class, we've seen that there have been conversations. We started about at the beginning of the month, covering the different domains of security. James, go ahead.
I need you, Professor. I need you so badly, man. And I am not jiving. Let me tell you, last night, I know you saw, what I submitted, but that last lab on the grades section,
Mhm.
it is a lab from HE double hockey sticks. It won't let me save on that Wireshark in the folder that
Okay.
is home/lab user. I've tried to create a folder and everything, and it won't let me move. I mean, it'll let me move forward to the next assignment, but I don't want to because it's going to ding me. It's going to take down my grade. So after class,
So,
can you
James,
show
let's
me?
finish the class and then we share your screen and then I can take a look at it.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I wanted to ask. All right,
No
thank you.
problem. Yeah.
And I did that survey too, so you got stellar. All
No problem.
right.
Um, so we started the conversation talking about you can lower your hands. Uh, inf Introduction to information security, the CIA triad, how everything now is tied back to ensuring the CIA of organizations has it. So we looked at the attack types, the different controls, what role cryptography has to play in securing a system, looking at endpoint security, looking at the mobile, there are different devices that make up infrastructure. So ensuring defense in depth at every point in time by looking at endpoint. From an endpoint perspective, what should we be doing? From mobile device perspective, what should we be doing? How do we ensure access is granted to those that have legitimate need for access? Still all tying back to CIA. Infrastructure threats, infrastructure security. We looked at wireless, cloud, vuln management. We simulated an incident, investigated the incident, and yesterday we talked about oversight and operations. So we're going to wrap everything up today by looking at some of the information security management strategies. Like, what are some of the information security management strategies, those mechanisms that have been put in place to ensure that all of those areas that we have covered is to ensure synergy between all of those areas and to ensure that there is proper structure. We talk about governance, what the role of the board is, and all those good stuff. But then there are some processes that have been put in place to ensure to deliver all the key roles and responsibilities of security professionals. And so this today we're going to talk about asset protection. Asset protection as a process, protection as a security tool, and even as a compliance tool. And then talk about risk management. What actually separates the good or the great from the good is the risk mindset. All right. A lot of things can be going on in the industry. So everybody needs anti-malware, yes. Everybody needs MFA, yes. There are some threats that might be affecting certain industries that may not necessarily affect your own organization. So taking a risk-based approach to say, oh, this is a kind of threat that is inherent in a financial service institution. If you go ahead and say, oh, this is a threat in FinServe, and you don't take that risk-based approach to think about, does this threat affect me as someone in the healthcare space or critical infrastructure space or education space or aerospace? Then, and you go about implementing controls just because the threat exists, it's a waste of the organization resources. So risk-based mindset separates the great from the good. All right, so we're going to talk about all of that today. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about asset management first of all. Asset management. All right. Do you know what you own? Like, do you know everything that you own? Do you know everything that you own? Like, do you know all your assets? As an individual, do you know all your assets? Do you have an inventory of your assets? Yes or yes? Unmute yourself, speak. Sophia says she thinks so. James, Kayla, Devin.
I would say yes.
Very good. That's good to know.
Thank you.
Devin, what about you?
What was the
Devin,
question?
the question was, you know all of your assets personally? Do you know the assets that you have?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. All right, so a lot of times it's always, I think so, maybe, but when you take an intentional approach to say, oh, let me document this asset, let me put pen to paper, then you might realize that you either have more than you think you had or less than you think you had. I embarked on an exercise very recently where I decided, look, I want to check my asset versus my liability. And that journey led to me putting all of my credit cards together and locking them up in a safe. And you know what that means? That means that I may have been operating based on certain assumptions. So I packed my credit card, put it in a box, wrapped it up, put it in my safe. That's telling me you're not going to spend from these cards no more. And the only thing I had in my wallet was debit cards. All right. So that tells me that I may have been operating with certain assumptions, and I need to, quickly take that action. All right. So the very first step to proper asset protection or asset management is visibility. So there is hardly a compliance standard out there that does not require that organizations have asset inventory, because it's what you have insight to its existence that you can actually secure. And even with AI, organizations need to have inventory of their AI systems as well. Whether it's AI that is provided to them by external parties or the ones that they develop internally. That way, they are able to implement safeguards for those AI systems. So asset protection starts with inventorizing the asset, And so, but assets in itself has a life cycle from acquisition to disposition. And so in between acquisition and disposition, changes do occur. And so it's important to manage those changes that occur properly to prevent adverse effects on the services that the asset is rendering or you're delivering, leveraging that asset. So when we say asset, of course, asset is anything that has a positive economic value. In an enterprise, assets is something that provides value to the enterprise. It could be their code base. It could be their secret recipe. It is something that cannot be easily repaid. It is something that gives the organization an economic advantage. All right? So it cannot be easily replaced without significant investment in expense, time, skills, and or resources. Right? And they form a great part of the organization's corporate identity. Guinness, their recipe. Coca-Cola, their recipe. Bank of America, their core banking assets. So those form a huge part of the digital identity of the organization. And those assets can be in form of data that has been collected, that has been organized or stored in various forms. For example, customer data, personnel data, production data, sales data, or even the organization's financial databases. And these are really of high value because they are extremely difficult to replace. Remember when we talked about ransomware? Without the backups, it's hard. And we're already thinking we just pay the ransom. All right? Or custom business software. These are software that supports the business processes of the organization. So, customized order transaction application, core banking application, the software that the organization relies on to deliver service to their customers. And it's of high value to the organization. Then we have system software. System software can be easily replaced. For example, operating system. And you can upgrade the operating system. You could install new off-the-shelf applications and things like that. Or drivers. Then you have physical items like the computer equipment, routers, switches, power supplies. Those you can easily replace. Services, voice service, data service, outsourced computing services, you can easily replace. I am not sharing my screen. Okay. Let me do that now. Okay, do you guys see my screen now? Do you guys see my screen now?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Greg. All right. So when it comes to asset management, it's a coordinated effort that an organization will put in place to realize the value from its assets.
Hey, Professor, I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
You call me another man's name. My name is James, not Greg. I'm so glad you're not my wife because you would have to explain yourself. Who the heck is
No,
Greg?
it was Greg. Greg actually sent me a direct message
Oh, okay.
saying that he didn't see my PowerPoint.
Oh, okay. All
So
right.
that's why I was saying, thanks, Greg.
How she
Thank
ever
you
call
for
me?
bringing that to my attention.
Don't call me a
But yes,
dumb
I
man.
agree. If this were to ever happen, she has to explain. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
sorry for interrupting.
No problem.
All right.
So to generate value from assets, there must be a systemic approach to how asset is governed, how to ensure that it's reached its full potential, it delivers the full value that is required. So we have processes. Cybersecurity had an access management process. And that's a process that combines asset management with information security. So this process, I can identify assets. I'll give you a real world example. So I had this computer. I have so much love and attachment to this computer. And so this is a computer that I used at my previous job. Okay. And ideally, this computer should not be with me anymore because I ought to have returned it. But I've made at least 2 attempts to return it. First, they were supposed to send a box to get it off me. They didn't. I've been to 2 FedEx offices to return it, but that hasn't happened. So it was just sitting here on my shelf. So I decided, well, let me first wipe off all my data that is on it. And the computer has been with me for more than a year since I stopped serving them. So now, the moment I wiped everything off, so that I could return it back to them. I get another alert again saying that I didn't get this alert all the while, but I got this alert again to say, oh, you still have our computer, you need to return our computer. And I'm like, you need to come get your computer off me, right? They are using asset management processes to ensure that they are tracking the asset. The moment it comes online for any reason whatsoever, it brings to their remembrance that, hey, you still have an asset. They get an alert that it needs to be returned. And so, and the way this works is there are some numbers that is kind of embedded in processes that is embedded in the Microsoft operating system, and it uses the hardware components as well. And so a combination of all of that, each time the computer comes up or online, the computer will be reported and it will connect to the organization's Active Directory and activate the organization's authentication process. And so if you don't have a valid authentication credential anymore, like I do not, then you will not be able to access the computer, right? So you will have to return it back to them. But after making these 2 attempts on my own, that's the process. That's a great process. But it's just one thing that is missing. Send a box to my doorstep. I put it in, hand it over to UPS or FedEx. And that's how majority of organizations do. That's how AWS did. It was the following day, there's an Amazon person at your door. No problem, Philip. There's an Amazon person at your door. You put the computer inside, they pick it up, they take it away, right? So those are asset management processes that actually work, although maybe just needs a little improvement there, because who has the time to drive 40 minutes to a college to a FedEx to go return? I haven't created that time. I'm going to try to. So this asset management process provides an updated list of the organization assets. And if there is an attack or there is an adverse event, there can be reached. All right. Then you have asset life cycle. When an asset is planned, is created, it's acquired, or it's reached its end of life, in the mix, there needs to be continuous monitoring and adequate management. For example, when asset is being planned, for example, you want to purchase, you have process for purchasing laptops for employee or acquiring data from data subject. There's a planning phase. Then the asset is created or is acquired from the source. It is operated and maintained. It needs to be monitored. It needs to be renewed and then disposed. All right. Of course, planning is following requirement definition. Okay. All right. So the in the asset management world, there is depreciation, right? So at every point in time, the procurement team are always calculating the cost of the asset. If it is operating, different costs, initial acquisition cost, operating expenditure. There are initial acquisitions like the CAPEX, the capital expenditure. Then you have the OPEX, the operating expenditure, preventive maintenance or corrective maintenance as if there is need, inspection, rehabilitation, and disposal. Okay. All right. So again, assets acquisition is procurement, and when determining, especially when it comes to security solutions, the security organization will work closely with procurement, and they may follow bidding processes, maybe a e-bidding process or standard bidding process. So requirements for that asset that is to be acquired must meet is gathered and sent out in form of request for proposals or what is called RFPs. Responses are gotten back. Different key stakeholders come together to make a decision on who to go with or which solution to not go with. Okay. Then when the asset is acquired, ownership is determined. A lot of times, it is even the owner that will kickstart the process of acquisition. And so ownership needs to be determined, because if no one owns it, no one is going to maintain it. So ownership is determined and the classification of that asset is determined. And a lot of times, the classification is generally based on how easy that asset is to turn into cash, how that asset is used, or if the asset is physically, exists. For example, is it a tangible asset, one that can be touched, or intangible asset, but it has monetary value, however, does not exist in physical form. Okay. Then tracking. I give you an example of the laptop. There's a tracking process in place. Inventory, we've talked about. And asset enumeration too. Listing the assets by the seller of those assets. So you want to dispose the asset, what is it worth now? Okay. Then when it comes to this disposal, the asset is withdrawn from service. So it could be decommissioning or disposal. So physical disposal can be destruction, donation. It could go through process of taking out the hardware, the hard drive, and donating that or auctioning that away. Decommissioning can be just withdrawn from service, and determination as to what will be done with it will happen afterwards. So when disposition must occur, there needs to be a way to scrub the data, to sanitize whatever data the asset held before disposal. That's why majority of organizations would remove the hard drive, because that's where the data reside. And then they will auction or sell it out or donate the physical asset or the computers without the hard drives. And so the hard drive itself can now go through process of sanitization. A lot of times, physical destruction is always the best. Because when you delete, sometimes if you use encase or FTK images or those forensic tools that I mentioned to you in the previous classes, you'll be able to restore the data back. But physical destruction is often the best. There could be, you could degauss, where you have degausser. I remember back in my banking days, the organization has had lots of hard drives that they never decommissioned or they never sanitized. They were just storing them. So one of my tasks was to work with IT to degauss. And so we'll put those hard drives on the degausser. The degausser will use it to have electromagnetic field to clear the data out. All right. And I write the serial number, and I'll sometimes randomly pick some of them to test whether there's still data in them. But the process was really tedious. So we decided, why don't we just go and physically destroy? So we got a company that does the crushing. So the only hurdle we now have to face is monitoring the process from loading it from source to the crushing destination and monitoring that crushing. By the time we were making the decision to crush, I'd seen all this. I'd seen evaluated like 3 sites. And we had made up our mind to go with this one company. By the time that process was to start, I had left the organization. But then that's how data must be taken care of when it comes to asset disposition. If it's paper media destruction, of course, using shredder, cross-cut shredder, for example, because there are different types of shredders. Cross-cut, micro-cut shredders are often the best to prevent dumpster diving. Okay, I'll take a pause. What are your questions? Questions. Okay, so let's talk about change management. Okay, as the business operates on a daily basis, the day-to-day business operating processes is often documented in what is called standard operating procedure. This is how this business will operate. And so, in order to ensure that changes, because change is inevitable when it comes to the computer system, or when it comes to daily operations, especially within the digital systems, you will have vulnerabilities that needs to be patched. You will have operating system that needs to be upgraded. You'll have software that needs to be upgraded. So managing these changes in a way that it does not affect the business process becomes something that is very important. Hence, what is called a change management process. It's a systemic approach to dealing with transformation, replacements, adjustments within an organization. Back in the day, 9 a.m. Wednesday morning is the day where we have our change control board, CCB, as we call those board. About 14 years ago, I had the opportunity to represent the information security team on that board. And so I will be there from InfoSec. Someone else will be there from IT control, another person from risk, another person from management, another person from the business will be there. And IT will come. Okay, IT will come. IT will present what they want to, what their change looks like. So they already have this form, and on that form, they will tell you what they want to change, whether they've tested that change before, who has approved that change, what their rollback plan is if something goes wrong. What else? When they hope to implement the change. So the rollback plan, the approvals, the testing, these are key elements that are important when it comes to change management. So they present this change. And so every member of the board is looking at, how does this affect my domain? I'm looking at things from a security perspective. Can this thing be compromised? The business is looking at it from a business process perspective. Risk is, so we're all coming together. Risk is saying, well, this could affect production, so I'd rather you do this on weekend or you implement it on off-peak period. If everybody is comfortable, the change gets approved. If we're not comfortable, we don't approve it, or we are kind of comfortable, we approve it with a clause. Maybe there's a certain recommendation that they must put in place. So that's how change management used to be. I don't know if it's the same now, but that was with the financial services institution. But with working for a software as a service company now, there's difference. The difference now is that we all implement this change management element into the business processes. For example, many SaaS companies use Jira. And so for their changes, so they are creating a ticket for change, but within that ticket, there is an approval process, there is a documented rollback plan, and there is an test. They're showing this is test we've done. So while it may not be a board where people sit and someone is presenting, it's a process that is already embedded in the change, in the way changes is being applied within the organization. And so the numbers of people that will approve are being tagged, and you see the approval. If they are not comfortable with it, so it's there in a different way, okay? And for all these things to have happened, it's been backed by a policy, the change management policy and the change management procedures, okay? And like I said, documentation is very critical, whether that is in tickets, whether that is in a Word document that has been presented in form of a form that is filled, it is important. Whether it's a flow chart, whether it's a spreadsheet, whatever form the organization decides on, it is very important both for internal and external control, because when external auditors do appear, one thing that they often look out for is look at the change management tickets, take a number of them, a sample, and look at each sample and see whether the adequate elements for proper change management exist within them. And I worked for an organization where they were always having these issues until I came up with the idea of, look, just let's customize your JIRA ticket fields for change management tickets and make certain fields mandatory. And so the moment they make those fields mandatory, we started to see a change where they are forced to document rollback plan. They are forced to get approval. They are forced to show what tests that they have done before attempting to apply that change. Okay, right? Then the same thing goes for version control with software as well. So a lot of times we use Git, and nowadays Git is the main tool for tracking the different versions of software. So even in Git, you see here, there's a push, there's a push, and there's a pull. Pull is somebody is pulling that change in. Push is somebody is pushing the change in, right? And then commit is when that change actually gets implemented, applied. And so these also will go through that level of approval. All right. So let me take a pause. What are your questions?
You know, Professor, I like the fact that you ask us for questions, but you are so thorough. I mean, what questions could we even have?
Say that again.
You are so thorough. What questions could we even have? You're such a great professor. You're a great teacher.
I don't know. It will be interesting to challenge my opinion or my thought process or share your experience too.
Right.
So it will be interesting. I mean, I love to learn from my students too. So if you don't have questions, then how about I ask questions?
Right. But we're like a sponge right now because you are taking us into a whole nother universe we've never been in.
I know.
Don't know what to ask.
Okay.
All right.
So, okay, now let me ask this question. So which of the following is a listing of assets by a seller of those assets? Is it asset enumeration, asset inventory, counting, or verification?
It's going to be verification. D.
Wait, what? No, I didn't say that.
You didn't tell me that?
A.
It's A. Yeah, it's asset enumeration.
That's what I said.
Oh, okay.
No, I didn't. I'm just
I
kidding.
thought you said verification. Yes,
I did say that.
enumeration.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's because you want to look at the asset and know what it's worth, even when it is auctioned away. You know what amount to ask. For example, the other day I was looking at a trailer that I was interested in for a truck, and I bidded 600, up to 600, and so it says reserve not met. And so it says reserve not met. I'm like, okay, nobody's going to buy it. You probably will sell it to me. At the end of the day, it went unsold. All right. It went unsold because the 600 they were asking for, they didn't get. Right. So that's because they've enumerated that asset and say this asset is worth more than 600. or maybe what they were looking for is 800 or 1,000 or whatever that amount is. The 600 that was offering just did not meet their reserve, the expectation. And so they decided not to sell. Without that level of enumeration, they might be selling at a loss. Okay. So now we'll pivot into risk management. Like I said, what separates the good or the great from the good is risk mindset. All right. And we all do this every day without even realizing it. Right? You want to go into a venture. I mean, you did a lot of risk analysis before you decided that, well, I would take this Security Plus class, or I would take this, I'll go through this computer science or information systems degree, right? You've thought about the financial investment, the time investment, and you've compared that vis-a-vis the return on investment, and like, okay, this is going to give me the ROI that I'm looking for. Right? A lot of people don't think that way. They just follow their passion and they spend the $100,000 in student loan only to be earning 40K a year. I don't envy them, but hey. Right? But yeah, back to risk management, just it's something that we do every day. We want to purchase a home, want to purchase a car. We do this all the time. We want to cross the highway. You look left, look right, look left again, and maybe look up and down. But yeah, we do that all the time. And so, because asset is always under threat by the threat actors, script kiddies, insider threats, nation state, hackers, and APTs, and those different actors, right? So taking a risk-based approach in securing assets is very important. And what do I mean by that? Look, risk-based approach involves doing what is called cost-benefit analysis. All right? Yeah, even though these vulnerability exist, is it exploitable? Or even though this risk exists, what is the likelihood of this risk materializing? And if the risk does materialize, what would be the impact? All right, of if that risk materializes, what will be the impact? So that is thinking from a risk perspective. That's why we have the formula for risk as likelihood multiplied by impact. There's a likelihood of certain occurrence, and if that risk materializes, this is the cost. For example, there's a likelihood of ransomware attack occurring. If it does happen, multiplied by the impact will be high. So likelihood can be low and the impact is high, and then you multiply that and get medium. And that would help you know what action to take, whether to accept the risk, whether to mitigate that risk, whether to transfer that risk or avoid that risk. So in general, we have four treatment actions when it comes to risks. So you've identified the risk, you've seen, oh, this is the likelihood multiplied by the impact, and it's medium, low or high. Risk can either be qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative is when you use that traffic light, green, amber, red, low, medium, high, or quantitative, where you actually quantify based on the dollar value. Now, irrespective of the approach that is taken, qual or quant, the action is to either avoid the risk, which most often than not is not a reasonable action, because that will mean I'm not going to do business in this area or not to use this system at all. Or you mitigate that risk, which means applying controls to reduce the risk, or accept the risk, which is, oh, yeah, I know this risk exists, but maybe because the cost of the control is higher than the return on the investment. Or maybe because, well, the likelihood of the risk materializing is minimal. Or maybe because we have compensating control, right? So we'll accept the control, the risk, or we transfer the risk. How do we transfer risk? We buy an insurance policy, insure our house, insure our car, insurance keep getting big, they collect our premiums, they don't want to be responsible for anything. I'm just kidding, but yeah, it's just the harsh reality of things. But so risk is defined as a situation that involves exposure to some type of danger. And so for risk to materialize, it means that there is a vulnerability that exists and the threat is exploiting that vulnerability. And so, and when it comes to risk can be from different sources. It can be internal to the organization or external. It can be from legacy system, multi-party, or even software compliance and licensing issues. Okay, so I'm going to take let's take 8 minutes break, come back and 7, and then we'll talk about risk analysis and pick things up from there. 7 minutes now. So let's take the 7 minutes break and be back in 7. Okay, thank you all for your patience. Not enough. Okay, let's get back to it. So, risk management. When the first thing is to look at the situation, the processes, and identify the risk. So, take for example, we are implementing a new AI solution. What are the risks that we get exposed to by implementing such solution? There's ethical risks. Say we're using this risk to evaluate people's employability. And so we need to think about the ethical concerns that it may pose. We need to think about the transparency. We need to think about how the process of it coming to a conclusion. We need to also think about the supply chain risk. So listing those risks involves creating a risk register. That risk register is where we will list all of the risks that exist within the organization. And then when we identify all those risks, we want to assess them one by one. By assessing them, we're looking at the likelihood of that risk materializing and the impact if it does materialize. Okay. Then when we identify that risk, and so for AI system or even human-related risk, we have different kinds of risk. For example, bias, different types of biases that we can be concerned about. Aggregate bias, for example, inferring something about an individual by using data that actually describe trends for the broader population. Or anchoring bias, or availability bias, or confirmation bias, present bias, framing different kinds of bias that may occur. All right. And once the risk identification, hold on, I want to show you that. Okay, I'm gonna go back here. So when we talk about risk identification, after the risk is being identified, I'm going to show a risk register, a live risk register, so that we can see. I should have one handy somewhere. Here we should see something that says risk register. All right. So this is an example of risk register. So you look at for uniqueness, I can't speak. For uniqueness purpose, the risk has an identification number, and then you have the different risk domain. For example, this IR01 is a risk related to control weakness identification. So control weaknesses identification, for example, there is lack of multi-factor authentication. That is the risk, lack of multi-factor authentication. What's the explanation for that? Attackers can easily take over account if MFA is not enforced, especially for remote access. So this one was a situation where I believe I gave the students certain scenarios, and so they interpret that scenario, those scenario, to identify all the risk involved in that scenario. So one of them was multi-factor authentication, and they say attackers can easily take over accounts if the MFA is not enforced, especially for remote access. Okay. Then when we looked at the likelihood of that risk materializing, it's a 2. And they are using a 5x5 matrix. So on a scale of 1 to 5, likelihood, on a scale of 1 to 5, impact. So they say if the likelihood of the risk materializing is 2 because of maybe the controls that is in place, and then the impact, if it materializes 5, which is grave. So the risk level becomes a 10. And then it has a risk owner, and the action here is to mitigate. They decided, well, we will mitigate the risk because 10 is more like on a scale of 1 to 25, it falls in the medium. And then you document treatment plan. This is typically how risk management or documenting risk works. You identify the risk, you analyze the risk. In the process of analyzing the risk, you look at the controls that you may have in place. For example, this second one talks about unfair discrimination and misrepresentation. So you have unequal, for example, unequal treatment of individuals or group by AI, often based on gender, race, or other sensitive characteristics, resulting in unfair outcome and representation of those groups. So the controls that are in place, for example, you have AI acceptable use policy, algorithm impact assessment, data minimization and anonymization, human in the loop, all right? These are controls. Now they check the effectiveness of the control, though I don't think this applies. You check the effectiveness of that control before determining the likelihood and impact, okay, of that, of the control. So risk, understanding the risk, checking the control effectiveness, the impact, the likelihood, and the actions that will be taken, which will in turn help the organization determine what their treatment plan is. If it's to mitigate now, what we will do to mitigate. They document that. That's typically how a risk register or risk management actually works. When it comes to the schedule, it can be a one-time thing. It can be ad hoc when necessary. It can be on a calendar basis, like recurring on an annual basis. It can be a continuous assessment as well. Okay. Like I mentioned earlier, it can be risk assessment can be based on qualitative or quantitative. Okay, this is like knowing the dollar value. It could be based on actuarial data. It could be based on when these had occurred before. This was what it cost us. This is taking going the extra mile, and there is a framework that is called the FAIR methodology. It's a methodology that seeks to quantify risk, factor analysis of information risk. Quantify risk, look at the risk from a quantitative perspective, knowing, okay, if we have a ransomware issue, it will cost us X amount, between X and X amount of dollars, okay? And quantitative tools that can be used to determine the likelihood of a risk occurring is mean time between failure, mean time to recover, mean time to failure, or failure in time, or historic data. That can also be used. For example, what is the annual rate of occurrence of tornado in Maryland versus the annual rate of occurrence of the tornado in California, okay, or Florida, all right? So historic data can also be used to quantify risks, all right? Insurance companies, law enforcement agencies, and we see this come to play even with our car insurance. You live in certain zip code and your insurance is really high, but you live in other zip code and your insurance is not as high. Same car, different people with same or even same car, same person, right? Same car, same person, just a change in zip code, right? We see that the difference there because crime rate is high in some places versus other places. Okay. Then the impacts of risk is quantified from an expectancy point of view. So if it happens once, that's what is called single loss expectation. If it happens once, how much is it going to cost us? If it happens on an annual basis, how much will it cost us? And what is our exposure factor? And these are the numbers that are used to determine the cost of risk. Risk register is an example of, I've shown you an example of risk register. Is a list of the potential threats and associated risk with the risk owners, with the likelihood, the treatment plan, and all that. Okay. And the risk matrix or a heat map is when you use qualitative and introduce some level of quantitativeness into it, but not of dollar value, but from a rating perspective. And this is what that looks like. So if, for example, you have a 5 by 5 risk matrix. All right. So up here is the impact or severity. Then you have here likelihood. All right. So the likelihood is from 1 to 5. It will certainly happen. It will likely happen. It's possible, it's unlikely, or rarely happens. The severity is 1 to 5, which means insignificant, minor, moderate, major, and grave, like seriously, really great. So this is a 5 by 5 matrix. Majority of organizations use this 5 by 5 matrix, okay, to calculate the risks and determine where the risk falls. So organization can now say, exactly, it's even here. They can now say, oh, if it is from 0 to 5, is it 0 to 9, we will accept the risk. If it's from 10 and above, we will mitigate the risk. Or it's categorized as medium, we'll consider mitigation. And if it is 15 to 25, we would definitely mitigate the risk. And that's an example of that risk matrix or heat map. Now, when it comes to treating this risk, certain factors come into play. We have the risk appetites differ. Even in relationship, as a family, as couples, you see that the risk appetite or the risk tolerance level differ from person to person. They say high risk, high reward, but then high risk, high loss too, if things don't go the way you have planned. All right. So the risk tolerance for organizations also differ. Organizations can say, oh, if the risk is going to cost us more than X value, we will mitigate. Like, this is the level of risk we can tolerate. This is the level of risk we can accept. While risk appetite is the total risk that the organization can bear in a given risk profile. So, some organization might be conservative, some might be expansionary, which is they have high tolerance for risk. Or some might be neutral, neither low nor high risk tolerance. So managing risk involves using specific strategies, addressing third-party risk as well, and applying awareness management. Okay? So like I said, you can either accept risk, transfer the risk, avoid the risk, or mitigate the risk. Okay? And third-party risk have become a major source of, I call it compromise for a lot of organizations, even with AI, right? So risk associated with third parties. See movies where people disguise like bartenders or HVAC technician, and then they go in to assassinate someone. So the third party risk is real, right? So for example, a textbook example is Target, right? At Target, we saw where HVAC supply had access to the organization's network, HVAC supply. So third-party risk is real. If it even became real and roles in that space expanded in 2021 during the SolarWinds attack. How many of you heard about the SolarWinds act or the SolarWinds attack? Should be 2021, 2020. All right? 2020, where Russian hackers, also known as Cozy Bear, they gained access into lots of organizations, especially government agencies, remote access to government agencies through SolarWinds. This was huge. Why? Because SolarWinds was serving so many. There is hardly an organization that didn't use SolarWinds for remotely managing their devices. In fact, during my banking days, we were using SolarWinds to manage our ATMs, to monitor the ATMs, to monitor the network devices, see what is down and what's not down. And so attackers leveraged SolarWinds. They were on SolarWinds network for a long time, embedded malicious code into the updates that SolarWinds pushed to their customers and government. It was serious. I'm not even kidding. This one was serious. So these hackers had backdoor access to government entities. Why? Because of their third party, SolarWinds. We saw the denial of service that in May, that over 9,000 higher institutions encountered as a result of denial of service attack that affected Canvas. Canvas was down, and it was down the week of exam during this last spring semester. So it's a third-party risk, and it must also be addressed. So risk of third-party integrations as well, offboarding, onboarding, application, social media network sharing, privacy, data sharing, and it's a lot. If I check here, I may or may not have it, but I'm gonna check. There was a risk. Let me find it first. There was a risk AI supply. Let me see. AI supplier. AI supplier. What did I call that? That thing? I think it's a question. I'm going to show you guys. I hope I have it. If I do, I will share with you guys. I'm going to take this out. Oh. Let me try elsewhere and see if I have it there. Okay, I don't think. Yeah, I do not see it, but that questionnaire was a questionnaire that was to assess third parties. And there were questions like, there's questions like, what data type do you collect from the organization? What data types do you collect from the organization? What do you do with the data? How are you training your models? Are you using the organization data to train models? And all those good stuff. I wish I had it. It was something I created a long time ago. Not long ago, like 2 years ago. So these questionnaires are good for assessing vendors. Sometimes too, it's important to request for penetration testing. Like I need to perform pen testing on the vendor's environment, or request internal audits. Especially for SaaS companies, customers always have the right to audit, and so they exercise the rights. Having proper rule of engagement and doing this third-party due diligence is very important. And so vendor assessment includes doing things like the service level agreement. We have service level agreement that our internet service provider will provide us internet service, 99.999% availability. Anything short of that, after so and so period, they will credit us back, or they will pay us back certain amount. This is the level of service that we are expecting and we have agreed to. Or business partner agreements, where we are going to work together on certain terms. Or memorandum of understanding, non-disclosure agreement, measurable system analysis. I don't think this one should be measurable system analysis. This should be master service agreement, not measurable system analysis. I think Cengage is tripping here. Is a scientific method used to check if tool or process are collecting data. Yeah, they made a mistake here. It should actually be master service agreement. And so with master set is a core legal contract that sets up the main rule for a long-term business relationship. Yeah. How and when the client will pay the vendor, the secret information, who owns the work. Yeah, that is master service agreement. So that is what that should be, not what they have written there, not measurable service agreement. Then memorandum of agreement, work order or SOW. So the work orders and SOW dictate the scope of work that needs to be delivered by the employers or by the third party. Guys, are you guys hearing background noise from my side? Are you guys hearing any background noise from here? No? Okay. Good. So yeah, security awareness is also one thing that is important in helping employees and contractors, understand how to report and manage risk. They look out for things that are not normal. And so training is also a very key component in managing risk within an organization. And there are different types of training. You have computer-based testing, role-based, awareness training, for example, security training for all employees, executive security training just for security leaders, training specific for support folks, privacy training for those that are handling organization private data. And it could also be in form of gamification or phishing simulation. And so there are different tools that organizations use to ensure that to deliver training. You have KnowBe4. KnowBe4 is one example that I'm pretty much familiar with. I've used it in the past. You have phishing campaign, gamification type of trainings, and all those good stuff. Like this is the phishing simulation dashboard that is not showing up. I'm trying to log into my KnowBe4 platform and try to do a show and tell of that. So let me log in. I'm attempting to log in and it says did I forget my password or something like that? Let's see, yeah. Let's see, maybe I got my email wrongly. Okay. Okay, I just can't reach it right now. But hey, this is Go Fish. The one I wanted to show us no before. This is Goldfish dashboard. It could be just conducting a phishing campaign. For example, during Thanksgiving, you say, hey, this is Thanksgiving promo of a credit card for Thanksgiving, or a claim for credit gift card rather for Thanksgiving coming from the CEO or the company. Click on the link to claim yours. And you see employees clicking, they click, it's ask them for their username and password, they supply that, and they fall for it. And so that can be used to measure human risk, like what percentage of employees within this organization will fall or are falling for this scam. All right. Then you can now do targeted training for those sets of people, for those individuals that have failed. Okay. So, which of the following is not a third-party risk? Onboarding, social media network sharing, risk awareness, network assignment. Which of them is not a third-party risk? A, B, C, D, or E?
Would be C, I think. Risk awareness.
It is
Would be
D.
C.
It
D.
is D. We didn't say anything about network assignment being a kind of third-party risk. All right. So this brings us to the end of this module, and in general, the end of this class. Ooh, let me go back there because I want to take a screenshot of that measurable system analysis there. Measurable. Yeah. Where is it? It's 9. So it's been such an interesting journey since the beginning of the month, and thank you all for letting me share my knowledge with you. What are your questions? If you do not have any questions, it's been interesting.